We're sitting in front of Vasily Surikov's painting of the Boyarina Morozova. This is a huge wall-size painting, probably, 8 feet by 20 feet maybe? It's huge. And in the center, we have a woman on a sled. Behind her is the horse, so she's being pulled on a sled.
A very decorated horse.
A very decorated horse, yes, which is actually a great example of some Russian folk art being depicted in a painting. So the woman on the sled, her wrists are in handcuffs, basically, and she's got a chain between her wrists. She's being taken away. This is her arrest. And there's a huge crowd gathered to see her off. So what is going on here?
Where are the arresting officers? Who are they?
That's a great question. I think they're probably behind the horse. You can't really see them very well. She's not being restrained by any particular officers, clearly. The story behind what's going on here is that in the 17th century, there was a patriarch of the Russian Church. The patriarch of the Russian Church is basically like the Pope of the Russian Church. And he, Patriarch Nikon was his name, and he decided that he wanted to reform the Russian Church. The Russian Church had diverged in its practices significantly from the way that the Greek Church was operating, and he wanted to bring them back into connection with the Greek Church and in line with things that the Greek Church was doing.
Sounds like some things that go on in our religious societies today.
They do. It does. Bringing back to he was trying to bring it back to what he thought was a more original, more pure form of the religion. However, there were a lot of people that disagreed with him and wanted to keep the church and the practices the way that they had been for as long as they knew and as long as their ancestors could remember. One of the biggest things about this reform that people objected to was the practice of using 2 fingers to cross oneself instead of 3. Nikon wanted 3. And a group of people known as the Old Believers, one of the practices they wanted to maintain was using 2 fingers to cross themselves.
So I see this man in the right-hand corner with the 2 fingers, and he's looking at the woman who has
who
2
also
fingers.
Has 2 fingers
So
up.
he's a sympathizer with her.
Yes, he's a sympathizer. I think most of the people on the right-hand side of the painting are sympathizers. You do see a few people. There's a boy up above her, I guess it'd be her left arm, who's kind of smiling and laughing at her. There's a couple of guys over on the left-hand side who are laughing. I don't think they're sympathizers, but I think most of the rest of the people that we see depicted here are sympathizers with the Old Believer movement. This painting as a whole represents a movement in Russian art to try to reconnect with past origins. So this painting was created in 1887. It's a painting from 1887 depicting a moment in the 17th century. So it's not a true to life. He didn't see this event.
It's not contemporary to the event.
Not at all. But the Old Believers, as a culture, they separated in many ways from Russian culture for several hundred years because they were banned by the church. They were outlawed. So a lot of them moved to Siberia and started their own tiny little towns, very isolated. If you can imagine the way that a lot of Amish communities operate in the United States, the Old Believers were very isolated in the same way and very suspicious of outsiders in a very similar way, so maintaining their old practices.
Now, is the man with the 2 fingers, is he a beggar? He has no shoes. His shoulder is coming through his rags. It looks like he has a bowl.
He could be a beggar. There is a tradition in Russian Orthodoxy called holy fools, and he might be considered a holy fool, someone who has abandoned all possessions in pursuit of living a spiritual life dedicated to God. And one of the ways that they existed was they would have a plate out for donations to help them survive, but they relied solely on the beneficence of other people.
How long long did it take to do this whole thing? I mean, I see on the sides, on the walls besides this big one, lots of individual paintings that appear to be studies in preparation for the great big one.
I don't know the exact number of years, but it probably took him a couple of years to create this painting, at least. But yeah, a lot of artists would create small studies of individual people. He probably had different models sit for him that he thought would be appropriate to put into this painting, and he would draw them from life. And then later he would put them into this larger painting from those sketches.
I find it a little bit humorous that the study of the beggar man is a much younger beggar man than the man that shows up in the painting.
Yeah, he
like
definitely
he aged during the time period.
Yeah, or the artist decided that it was more appropriate to make him look older.
I think he aged.
Okay. So what happened to this Boyarina Morozova? She was actually the sister of a princess, but she was taken in her arrest and imprisoned, and she later died in prison. So she became kind of a martyr for the Old Believers, which is one of the reasons why it's such an important figure to be depicted in this kind of historical romanticism, recalling the more pure Russian past that happens in this kind of a historical painting. So I guess it's kind of like a snapshot of what Surikov imagined life to have been before his time.